Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Nordic Football Podcast. I'm Steve Wyss and I'm joined as ever by Jonathan Fadugba for hopefully another episode of Trials and Tribulations. How are you doing, my friend?
We'll beat you at home, we'll beat you away, stop crying, Frank Lampard. How does that make you feel, Steve?
Angry. Angry, to be honest with you.
I'm sorry, I couldn't.
We're not even going down that route.
I couldn't resist. Hello to everyone, and hello to Steve. I'm very sorry about your result yesterday, but I had to mention it because it was such a great game. And obviously, Pontus Jansson is a Leeds player, and I had to throw that one in there as a Swedish player himself, although he didn't play, did he? But yeah, how are you feeling? Have you recovered from the disappointment of that playoff defeat?
No, I'm not recovered really. It doesn't usually affect me as much as that, but
it really knocked you, didn't it?
Oh yeah, because I expected to win easily. You know, if we had lost, I didn't think we were going to win the final. I really do rate Aston Villa at the moment quite highly, but I certainly did not see that coming at all. To be honest, I'd not rated Derby all year, so for that to happen, very disappointing. And I think quite a lot of people are sorry to see Leeds go, actually, for once. We seem to have gained more love than ever this year. I think Liverpool became the most hated team ahead of us. So it's a shame, but we'll go on another day, don't we?
We do indeed, and we've got plenty to talk about. We had 2 game weeks in the last sort of period since our last podcast. So strap yourselves in, and I hope you're ready for some serious Swedish and Norwegian chatter. Steve, I cheated on you this week, actually.
I know, I heard about it. Well, it was, we do have rather an open relationship, in fairness, don't
we? Free to explore temptations with other podcasts. And I was on the Sound of Football podcast this week with our good friend Graham Sibley, who I've known for many years. And we did talk about Sweden and Norway just the summer. One of the themes of the podcast was what to watch over the summer. And obviously, our leagues are quite prominent in that discussion. So it was good to be on the show. If you haven't given them a follow yet or listened to the show, at Sound of Football, Sound of Football podcast, give it a little listen if you want to hear more of my dulcet tones. But enough of that, and let's get into the Nordic Football podcast, which is why we're here. Steve, what have we got to talk about this week? What are the big talking points? Where are we starting?
There's loads, isn't there? How long have we got, There's so much to discuss, isn't there, at the moment, because there's so many matches going on. Just before we do start, Sweden, I do want to reiterate that point. Your appearance on the Sound of Football podcast was very good, actually. Enjoyed your episode immensely. I think there was a particularly good discussion about the Nations League, which I very much enjoyed. But if you want to listen to that, then, as I say, Sound of Football podcast episode, I think we've got it retweeted and tweeted around, so search for that. But on to Nordic matters, and we'll start in Sweden. And things are getting really close in the Allsvenskan. It's obviously a midweek round. The most recent of them was tonight on Thursday night. It's a top of the table clash between IFK and Malmö. It was a goalless draw, but you had your eye on this one. Was it as bad as the scoreline suggested?
Well, quite presumptuous of you there to say IFK, Steve, as there's 2 IFKs in the league. But we all know who they're talking about deep down. IFK Göteborg, who the surprise title challengers as at the moment. Although calling them title challengers might be a bit premature, but they're second in the table after a fiery start, in which I have to say, for me, they've probably been the most exciting team in the league this season so far to watch. Really flown out of the traps this season with a really exciting young team. And yeah, it was a decent game. We've talked about some of their players. Obviously, we have a partnership with Y-Scout, and I recently wrote a blog on Benjamin Nygren, which you can check out on Y-Scout, at Y-Scout's page there. They've got the blog postings. With our partnership there, we write regular articles for them on Scandinavian football. So I wrote about Nygren, but he's not the only good player in that team. There's many that we're going to talk about in this episode, actually, isn't there, Steve? And yeah, the game was 0-0. It wasn't the most great spectacle from a goals point of view, of course, with 0. But I found it an entertaining game, to be honest. I thought it was a good demonstration of the quality in Allsvenskan in terms of the top 2 teams it had its peaks and troughs. It wasn't always that exciting, but I think the overall standard was quite good. I thought it was quite an interesting tactical battle, which we'll talk about, between the two managers. And all in all, it was had enough tension about it. 17,000 fans in the crowd. It was a good game, I thought.
I have to say, just looking at this table now, they're the team that I am surprised are as high as they are, considering the season preview we did, a lot of the media talk pre-season as well. You're a man who has strong connections with the city of Gothenburg, John. Do you think the fans can quite believe what's going on? Are they starting to believe something special could happen this year, or is this just one of those great starts that may well fizzle out?
Well, to answer the first question, no, I don't think the fans can really believe what's going on. To be honest, I think there is a good degree of shock about it all. It's I'm shocked, to be honest, how well they've started. 18 goals, they've scored the joint most goals in 9 games, obviously. So they're averaging 2 goals per game, which is really, really impressive. When you consider last season, they were quite drab. They weren't the most exciting team in the league to watch by any stretch of the imagination, with 38 goals in the league. Just roughly over 1.1 goals per game. So they've upped that massively, and they've started very well. Obviously, they've lost 2 games, and the thing about IFK, Steve, is they're a good counter-attacking side. And I'm a big fan of counter-attacking football. I always have been. It's part of the reason I love the Manchester United team of the 90s. So good on the break. You can have a corner and go 15 seconds later, it's a goal at the other end, and I love that kind of football. And IFK are bringing that kind of football. They press well. They're aggressive. They counter press. They've got a young team with a lot of energy. They're hungry, and they're good at dispossessing the opposition and then going on the counter attack. And Uwe Rosler mentioned it today in his post-match interview. He said that because he gave Bonke Innocent a rare start, and his reasoning behind that was that he wanted 2 defensive central midfielders, Oscar Levitsky as well, and Innocent, to kind of block IFK's counter-attacking potential. And I think it was a really interesting point he made, and I really agree with it, because IFK have got so many exciting players on the break. They've got a lot of speed, a lot of youth, one of the youngest teams in the league, and they use the likes of Benjamin Nygren, Patrick Carlson-Lagermir, who we'll talk about, Yusuf, Kirishvili as well, Robin Soda, who's a fast player, Lasse Vibe. They've got a lot of good players on the break. So Rosler had to deal with that, and he did to a certain extent. It was quite cautious. But I think they surprised everyone, really, Steve, to be honest. And the way they're playing at the moment, long may it continue.
Do you know what? The sheer mention of Bonke Innocent always brings a smile to my face. Just the name, it's just one of the best names in football, isn't it? I have to say.
He straddled both leagues, hasn't he? Because he was in Norway. But funnily enough, I know you've had a few comments about him in previous podcasts, but he received a lot of praise for his performance today. He was voted the man of the match from the Malmo, I think, official website. And it was a rare appearance for him, but he certainly held his own, and Uwe Rosler praised him after the game.
I rate him. In terms of, we've talked about Nygren quite a lot already on this podcast, so I think maybe it's about time some of the other guys at Göteborg were mentioned, and I wanted to talk about Kirishvili, because this was a guy who, ever since I dumped him from my fantasy team, seems to have gone from strength to strength, chipping in with all sorts of goals and assists, and he's quite a key part of the team, isn't he?
He's a good player. Yeah, he was spotted by IFK scouts at, I think, a youth tournament in which Georgia played, and obviously they monitored him for quite some time before signing him. He had a bedding-in period last year, but by the end of the season he was doing very well, and I had him in my fantasy team from day one, actually. But he didn't quite perform in the opening rounds, but he's starting to come into it now, and he's slightly older than, because the thing is, obviously, IFK have played a lot of kind of even teenagers, young academy players, and Kirishvili is not an academy player. Obviously, they signed him, paid money, but he's still a young player and is still developing. So I think he's got talent, and he's a little bit different. He's a good ball player. He's creative. He's got a good eye for a pass. threads the ball well, and he's been a solid addition to the team. I think he'll only get better. I think he's got good potential.
I mean, in terms of this match tonight against Malmo, a 0-0 draw. I think it's the first time that Malmo have failed to score in a match this year. I mean, that's got to be encouraging for IFK, hasn't it? That they can hold them to a clean sheet. Do you think this was a sort of fixture which a lot of people would have expected them to lose, and they've done kind of, a very positive thing that they've avoided defeat against the favourites for the title?
Yes, very much so. And one of the things that IFK's manager, Poya Asbaghi, commented on after the match was he described it as they shut down Malmo. He said they completely shut down their offensive capabilities, and I think he was right to a certain extent. They played a very compact shape. I was actually really impressed with IFK in the sense of their defensive discipline. That we've all talked about their attacking ability going forward, how exciting they are. But here they showed a different side to their game, which bodes well for their potential season, as a whole. They showed the ability to sort of sit down, sit deep, play a compact game. They had four, 2 banks of 4 kind of thing, very low block, and just looked to kind of contain Malmo, which worked. Obviously the likes of Marcus Rosenborg are, in their 30s, and they're not going to be, they're not going to be kind of breaking in behind, are they? But they're going to, they're still a threat in the box and that kind of thing, and you have to be careful. But IFK were quite careful, and I think Sebastian Olsen, the right back, had a great game. And overall, yeah, they shut them down. I think it was a really interesting tactical battle. There's been comments that Fouad Bachiru was missed in central midfield because Malmo didn't really create a huge amount. But I think I agree with Poya Asbaghi, who said that the fact that Uwe Rosler played 2 defensive central midfielders kind of is testament to how well IFK have done this season. And I think all in all, it was almost a tribute to them. Malmo are doing very well. They've got the best expected goals against record in the league with only 6 expected goals against them. So I think they are impressing me. But all in all, both teams I think have got a lot to be positive about at the moment.
What would you say IFK have got to do in order to maintain their level at the moment? Is it a question of everything's just going right for them, players are in form? When they hit that sort of bad patch, do you think they've got the right sort of mentality? Can they grind out an ugly sort of 1-0 win?
I think from IFK's point of view, I'm not sure they're going to be the team that will grind things out. I think they, as I've said before, they've taken members of GIF Sundsvall's famous attacking side last season, the coaching staff, some of their coaching staff, and they're trying to implement this new style of football, and it doesn't really rely on kind of being a defensive unit or grinding games out. But their next 2 games are Hammarby at home and Häcken away, which is the derby. I'm going to have a real close eye on those 2 games because we'll learn a lot about IFK in those 2 matches, in my opinion. And if they come out of those 2 with 6 points or anything close to 6 points, then I think we really can take them seriously. They owe Häcken in a sense because Häcken have smashed them in the last 2 seasons' derbies away from home, scoring 4 goals in each derby. So there's a little bit of revenge there on the cards potentially. And Hammarby are doing very well. We'll talk about them later. But I think the next 2 games are a big test. If they get to 10, 11 games played and are still up there, we can reassess it.
At this stage of the season, which team from Gothenburg do you think will finish highest? Häcken or IFK?
Oh, you're putting me on the spot there. They're joint on points. They've both got 17 points, identical record. IFK have scored 18, Häcken have scored 12. IFK have conceded 10, Häcken have conceded 5. There's +1 goal difference in it. Impossible to call right now, but maybe just because of the defensive side of things, Häcken. But IFK are going well.
Interesting one. So, I mean, it's really close at the top of the table for those who don't know. Malmo on 18 points, and then there's 4 teams on 17, and then a couple of teams on 15. So it's bloody tight up there. Malmo are the league leaders, and it seems they have kicked on from that last season, at the end of last season. And you would expect them to be right up there throughout the whole campaign, wouldn't you?
Yep, definitely. My pre-season podcast prediction was Norrköping, and I'm not ready to ditch that yet, but I'm very, very close to ditching that because Malmo are looking slightly ominous. You know, they've got the good balance, 16 goals scored, 8 conceded, the best XG against, as I mentioned. They look very solid. They look hard to break down. My one worry about them in pre-season was their creativity. You know, can they break teams down? Can they get the job done consistently? Because I feel they lack a little bit of pace and spark. But the likes of Traustason, Soren Reeks, they're producing at the moment. Traustason has 3 assists. And Marcus Rosenborg, the old veteran, is the top scorer in the league with 6 goals, joint with Linus Hellenius and El Yunusi. So, yeah, they're getting goals and they look very solid. I think they're going to be a hard team to break down. EFK struggled today to really break them down. And I think that will be a theme for teams that come up against them. So, yeah, I'm leaning now further and further towards Malmo as a real challenger this season.
I mean, your pre-season title prediction was Norrköping, and you say you're close to giving up on them. They are on 11 points. It's not like they're a million miles adrift, but you know they are a bit adrift. What's gone wrong there at the start of this year for Norrköping? It just seems, I mean, just looking on the basic raw stats, that they just seem to be bang average in every department. Really, is it a simple case of that?
Yeah, I'm not happy with them, Steve. I'm not happy with them at all. They're making me look like a bit of a mug, to be honest, with my prediction. It was good to hear a fellow listener of the pod mention on our Twitter account the other day that he also thought they would do well. But they're just not doing it at the moment. And I'm going to give you a statistic here, Steve. They've got the second lowest expected goals in the league, according to Y-Scout data. 7.59 goals expected. That's pathetic, to be honest.
That's terrible.
Not only that, I mean, for a team that's supposedly, you know, title challengers, but not only that, Steve, Isak Pettersson, the Norrköping goalkeeper who is highly rated, he has made the second most number of saves in the league this season, with 30 saves made already. They're leaking goals. They've conceded 13 goals, which is more than the likes of, say, Kalmar. And I just don't think they look out of ideas. I mean, they lost to EFK in a recent game at home, 2-1. And in that game in particular, you know, I felt they looked out of ideas. They didn't look like a great team to me. And I'm a bit worried about them. I think they've got a lot to do. They look a bit turgid, just quite slow. Jordan Larsson is very hot and cold. There's been some, you know, comments that maybe their manager, some discontent from the manager, from fans towards the manager. Peking are just not looking too tasty right now.
Yeah, Jordan Larsson, did you tweet something about him from the Nordic Football Pod account this week? I can't remember exactly what you said about him, but it was something interesting along those lines. But I mean, last year they scored so many goals, didn't they? Was it they netted in every single away game? So is that a simple case of the players they lost and they haven't been able to replace them, or maybe a bit of a hangover from? I mean, they were involved in that title battle. They never really looked like properly winning it, but maybe it took it a lot out of their system, John, perhaps, and this is the syndrome of the season after. Possibly
because they had such an amazing run, but I don't think it's that. I think they've just been a very, very average, you know. And they need to do more. The games I see them play, they just don't look very. They haven't really gelled, you know. Maybe they sort of miss some players who have departed over the winter period, but they just haven't. You know, every game I see them play, they don't look like really stamping their authority. Even in games like Kalmar, where they drew 2-2 away, Helsingborg, obviously they lost that game 3-1. You know, they've drawn with Malmo at home. They've played some tough games, to be fair to them. They've played AIK, they've played Malmo, they've played Djurgården away. You know, they've played EFK, so they've got a lot of tough games out of the way, you could argue. And that Örebro win tonight was very, very big, because if they hadn't have won that, I would have been really worried for them in terms of the title race. But, you know, they're 7 points off it. It's not over. for them. But they do need to improve, in my opinion. And I just think that with that low XG is really worrying. And then the fact that they're conceding so many shots as well. They're lucky they have a very, very good goalkeeper to keep them out, keep the goals out at the moment. It's almost a bit like sort of a David De Gea situation where you've got one keeper keeping them afloat, really.
A good goalkeeper, a really top-class keeper, can mask over a lot of cracks. And I think I saw him in a couple of games this year. I think one was against Djurgården, maybe. And he looked, his reflexes looked superb, I must say. But is there a player that Norrköping could perhaps turn to improve their goal scoring? Or are they going to have to look to the summer window to improve that tally?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think Niemann has not really done as well as maybe expected. I thought in the IFK game he was a little bit disappointing. So that's something to think about. You know, he has scored. He did score against Malmo, but yeah, you know, they've got Callahan. But I mean, the reason I went for them at the beginning of the season was because I felt they had so many different options. You know, the likes of Kalle Holmberg, the likes of Niemann, the likes of Larsen, Haksabanovic, but they've not really, you know, Haksabanovic has been a real disappointment. I mentioned there was concerns about him at West Ham in the preseason show, and you know, some question marks about his overall commitment. He's been relegated to the bench already now, and when you consider he was meant to be a big star for Norrköping this season, that's the worrying sign. Simon Tern's been okay, but not exceptional. Fransson's been okay, but not exceptional. The defense has not been great, you know. Yeah, they're just. I'm a bit worried about them, really. I don't think they're looking good at the moment, and they need to up their game. They've got Gifsonsvall next, then Hammarby away, and I need them to up their game, really, if they're going to be in this title race, to be honest. Otherwise, I'm going to have to ditch them.
Well, it happens to the best of us. I mean, do you remember me last year with Strømsgodset predicting them to challenge for the title, and they nearly got relegated, so these things can happen. But
the one thing is, you know, just on that note, before we move on, they were like this last season, not sure. They didn't start well. They lost 2 games in their first 6. So, and one of them was against Trelleborg, the worst team in the league by a distance, at home. So it was in the second half of the season where they really, really picked up in the summer and went on that incredible run. So it's not all over for them. And I think, you know, if they, like I said, if they can stay in that 6 to sort of 7 point bracket from the top of the table, then maybe they can accelerate. But you know, if they hadn't have beaten Örebro tonight, for example, and you're getting to 8-9 points, then I would really think that it's going to be hard for them to sort of go on such a run to catch Malmo. But yeah, they just need to up the ante a bit now.
Yeah, at the moment they're not in this title race at all. But as I said, there's quite a few teams that are, and it seems Stockholm is. Djurgården led the way early doors, but the other 2 teams from Stockholm are starting to get properly firing now. AIK and Hammarby have both won 4 of their last 5 games, and we're going to talk in detail a bit about one of those teams, Hammarby. They've won the last 4 in a row. I know fans are starting to get quite excited about this side, Hammarby. I mean, it was kind of the same last year when they were up there, but do you see their prospects for 2019? Can they actually last the pace this year?
Well, you know, it's a bit like that song, isn't it? When I was 17, it was a very good year. It was a very good year. We've got so many teams on 17 points at the moment. IFK, Häcken, Hammarby, and AIK all behind the Malmo have hit the 18-point barrier, and they're of the legal age now. But yeah, Hammarby are looking good. Like I say, they've scored the joint most goals in the league with IFK. They've got an enterprising style about them. A couple of stats for you here, Steve, on them just quickly. They've got the where am I? They've got the best possession statistics in the league, 55% possession, and also not just that, they have, like I said, scored the joint most goals, and they've also had the most touches in the opponent's box of any team in the league. 193 touches in the opponent's box, so they are getting into good areas of the pitch. In general, it's not just a fluke that they've scored those goals. Obviously, this is helped by the fact that they battered Östersunds 4-0 in their most recent game, which pushed them up the table. And, you know, Östersunds I'm a little bit worried about, as I mentioned before. But yeah, 4 straight wins now for Hammarby. And really the man behind that is Muammar Tankovic, who's been absolutely fantastic in recent weeks.
Yeah, I've noticed this guy racking up a lot of points in the Allsvenskan fantasy. I'm debating about whether I'm not going to have to bring him into my team, to be honest, John. He's been absolutely crucial of late. What are his star qualities that he brings to the field?
Well, Tankovic was previously at Fulham as a youngster, so he's been around the block a little bit. He is an exciting player, and his goal contributions have been really, really good lately. He's racking up goals and assists. He's a creative player. You know, as I mentioned in the last game, he scored a penalty against Östersunds and he got an assist. He scored 2 goals in the win against Sirius in the previous match. So that's 3 in 2 games for him. You know, he's, like I say, he's a creative player. He's exciting. He's been in Holland as well. He's just a lively player. I think people are looking at him now and saying, maybe is he worth a move in the summer? You know, seems to be, as I mentioned in the pre-season show about Hammarby, their players stick around for such a short period of time. It's hard to ever really have faith in them. Seems like they're off in a flash, and we're going to talk about one of them who's off in a flash, literally, you know, in that sense. But yeah, there's been rumours about Tankovic maybe moving on if he continues this form. You know, he is 24 now, but he's been around for so long, moving to different countries. As I mentioned, he played at AZ Alkmaar. So you'd like to see him sort of settle somewhere, to be honest. I don't really think he should be moving right now, to be in my personal opinion. But, you know, his stats are so good right now, 4 goals, 2 assists in 8 games, that maybe people will be thinking that he might move.
But it's like you say, Hammarby, nobody ever seems to really settle at Hammarby, do they? I mean, what can the club do to change this conveyor belt system where it seems there's so many goes out and so many go in every year? I know it's a Swedish problem, perhaps a Nordic problem, full stop. But as a club, it's just it seems a bit extreme. And the only way they're going to develop long term is surely if they keep a bit more of a core nucleus.
Well, I mean, like I say, I called it in the preseason pod. It's so hard to get any consistency with them in terms of personnel. You know, they have a scouting and sporting director who seems to be quite active. You know, they seem to be very clever in their business. An example last season was obviously Neto Borgs, who they signed from a random team in Brazil. I remember this time last year in the preseason show of 2018, just like questioning who the hell this guy was. I think he was from the Brazilian second division. I'd never heard of him. Comes along, even people in Brazil I spoke to had not really heard of him. Comes along, has an outstanding season at left back, and you know is sold within a season to Belgium. And we've had a similar case, haven't we, this past week or so with Kosanu, who was one of my 10 to watch for the season, and he's been so good to watch. He's off.
Well, yeah, I mean this has happened before with the players to watch that we've both come out with, but I didn't expect this to happen so soon and in quite such a well. It's quite an amazing transfer. Having a look at it, I mean, tell us a bit more about the deal here, John, because it's remarkable.
Well, it's not just remarkable; it's kind of a bit really, almost ridiculous, to be honest. I mean, talk about going in 60 seconds. So yeah, Odilon Kosanu is an 18-year-old centre back from the Ivory Coast, and I did mention to you in the pre-season show, and you know, in our 10 to watch, that he's very highly rated in terms of within Hammarby's the corridors of Hammarby. A big lad, really tall, sort of imposing physical player at the back, a bit maybe like Eric Bailly, if you wanted to have an example. But well, actually, I was going to say slightly different, but no, I think he's similar because the games I've seen him play, I actually think he's been quite clumsy, and you know, although you can see the raw attributes, he's not the finished article by any stretch of the imagination. But obviously, people disagree with me in that sense because after 6 games played and 266 minutes of football, he has become the most expensive defender in Swedish football history, with a 30 million SEK Swedish krona move to Club Brugge, which is, yeah, as I mentioned, the biggest deal for a defender in Allsvenskan history. It could move up to 40 million, depending on appearances. And so, as I say, gone in 266 minutes in this case, and he's out of the league, and he will be transferred at the next opportunity.
Tell you what, he better be bloody good. I mean, £2.5 million, a club like Club Bruges. I mean, I don't know what their financial situation is, I must admit. Maybe they've got a rich sugar daddy or something there, but that just seems like quite a lot of money for a team from Belgium to be splashing out on a kind of an unknown, ish sort of player. I mean, I'm sure they've done their research and scouting and everything, but how do you think he's going to fare in that league, from what you know of the league, John?
Well, I read some comments from his agent recently on a blog, and he mentioned that the opportunity was just too good to turn down for him. He said that the player was very, very focused and wants to move on in his career. He said that the player is very hard-headed and just sort of decided that it was something he wanted to do. He mentioned the fact that obviously, as an Ivorian, he speaks French, and he wanted to be in an environment in Bruges where there's more French players, more African players, and the language is already something that he's familiar with, rather than maybe learning Swedish. I guess from his point of view, if the opportunity comes, then you take it. But from Bruges' point of view, either they've seen something that they just decided, let's just splurge that cash straight away, spunk it up the drain pipe, and get out of here, or they really, really have just got money to burn and just don't care, because 266 minutes, Steve. I mean, I could look good in 266 minutes of football. You need to have a bit of due diligence. But to be fair to Cossinu, I think there is a reason I put him in my team. Tend to watch. He does have the profile to go very, very far. You can see the raw attributes are there. If he can sort of improve slightly technically and in terms of his overall knowledge of the game, like I say, he's got the potential to be a sort of a Kolo Touré, or a Bailly, and follow in that line of Ivorian centre backs. To be honest.
Well, I know we have a decent listener base in Belgium, so I would imagine some people from Club Bruges even listened to your pre-season podcast talk about him, John. Maybe it was a factor.
Maybe that was it. I mean, maybe they just listened to the pod and thought, right, let's just buy the 10, because last season we were pretty spot on with our recommendations. Who knows?
It's just one more thing before we move on about the money aspect for Club Bruges. I mean, £2.5 million. If say a Premier League club or even a Championship club splash that out, that's the sort of thing they can almost afford to do. And if it's a bust signing, it doesn't matter. But for Club Bruges, they must be pretty bloody seriously hot about him. That's all I can say. And it's the sort of guy I'm sure you'll be following his progress, won't you?
Yeah, I mean, just on that interview that I read, and it was a website called Football Stockholm, his agent said there was interest from the top 3 clubs in the world, and he commented that basically, I think there's rumours it was Arsenal, but anyway, I don't know who. Manchester United apparently may be one of them. The claim is that they went to watch him in a game, and he didn't play well. And then essentially, his agents called up Club Bruges and said, listen, United are watching him, Arsenal are watching him. If you don't take him now, you'll never get him. And, maybe this guy's played a blinder and just sort of, done the deal of the century here. Or maybe Bruges have really seen something and just thought, forget it, we're not waiting. But yeah, I mean, Sweden to Belgium is quite a well-trodden path at the moment. Buya Touré is one who came back and he ridiculed the Belgian league. Yeah, it's going to be an interesting transfer. And, Hammarby, funnily enough, have already brought in another Ivorian on trial, a youngster. So, the talent factory continues, and as I said to you, Steve, essentially, you never know what you're going to get with Belgium in terms of their players, and that's what makes it hard to really forecast their season, to be honest.
Yeah, well, let's stay in Stockholm, and as I mentioned, AIK, their form has started to pick up again, and they're right back up there into 5th place in the league now, 17 points for them, and one man has been a big spearhead in their recent upturn in form, hasn't he?
Yes. Tarek El Yunusi, he's finally had some form. And funnily enough, Steve, on our Nordic Football Podcast Twitter, at Nordic Footpod, by the way, hint, hint, if you're not following us already, I was about to tweet about 2 weeks ago, I remember, watching an AOK game, and I was about to tweet. You know when you're about to sort of you type something and you're about to press send, and you think to yourself, "Shall I?" And I was about to slam El Yunusi. I was about to say, "This guy has done nothing all season." I'm glad I kind of didn't, because it would have come back to bite me in the backside quite quickly. Because yes, in the last sort of few games, he's really hit form now. 4 goals in 2 games, or 5 goals in 3 games, depending on how you want to look at it. But the key goals really were the 2 winners, 2 goals in the derby against Djurgården to win that game. That's what's really hit his form there. And I have to say, Steve, the defending for the second goal in that match was just an absolute disgrace. I mean, there's a really good camera angle. I don't know if you can find it on YouTube or somewhere, but there's a camera angle of that goal. It's literally one punt. It's like non-league football. It's one punt from Sebastian Larsson into the box. El Yunusi starts his position as a sort of left midfielder, and all he does is literally run a diagonal run into the box from midfield. He literally runs past 3 players. They all look at him. They just look at him. And he runs into the middle of the penalty area and just fires the ball home first time. He just lets the ball land and hits it into the net. It's bizarre defending. You know, you got I think it's the right back, the centre back, and then the another centre back. They all just watch him run past him. I have to say that the camera angle really captures the terrible defending from Djurgården's point of view. But yeah, in general, you know, like I say, 5 goals in his, you know, so basically he had 1 goal in 6 games. And he's now gone on a run and scored 5 in 3 to make himself the joint top scorer in the league. IFK, I'm going to be honest, and sorry to some of their fans to disappoint you when I say this, but I found them a bit boring to watch this season. I'm not massively enjoying them in the early part of the season. One other thing to point out is they've kind of lost a little bit in terms of their propensity for clean sheets. Any of you fantasy players, I'm sure who've got a lot of the defenders in your team, like me, for example, they're not quite keeping the same rate of clean sheets and low goal scoring ratios as they did last season. They've already conceded half the number of goals that they conceded in the entirety of last season. So that tells you a little bit about them at the moment. But El Yunusi is doing very well, and yeah, things are looking okay for IFK. Considering their start to the season, I think the fans will be very, very happy with 17 points, 1 point off the top.
You mentioned that goal against Djurgården, and you just wonder whether some supernatural forces are at work again with the ghost of the Stockholm derbies for Djurgården. It's not well. It was interesting because before they lost to Hammarby, I was reading Bio Torre. He was bigging it up, wasn't he? Oh, we're the best side in Stockholm, etc., etc. Well, that doesn't look particularly good now, does it? Because they've gone and lost back to back against their biggest rivals.
Well, yeah, I mean, he does talk a lot at times, Bio Torre. I do love him, but he has got a bit of he's got a quote in him. Let's put it that way. But yeah, I think the thing with IFK is they always seem to find a way, whether it's through recruitment or just players hitting form, and you'd be foolish to write them off really. But yeah, like you say, you mentioned the ghosts, Steve. The 3 defenders there were like Pac-Man. It was like watching. It's like El Yunusi was Pac-Man, and they were running away because maybe it was just the camera angle, but I've not seen defending like that. It was shambolic.
Okay, well, that's pretty much wraps up Sweden for now. Not really gone into detail about the bottom of the table, but that can wait for another day. All of the crunch stuff talked about, John, and thanks very much for your input as usual.
No problem at all.
Okay, we'll have a little bit of a break and then move on to talk about Norwegian Eliteserien stuff. So catch you in a minute.
Welcome to part 2 of the Nordic Football Podcast. We are going to be joining the goings-on in Norway now with a look at the Eliteserien, which is grinding itself into gear. There's been a break every now and then a midweek round here and there. A mixed mishmash of games. Sometimes it's hard to keep up with the scheduling, isn't it? Some teams have played 8, some teams have played 9. Steve, the one thing I've noticed about this league is the league table seems to be practically upside down. You've got Rosenborg and Strømsgodset second and third bottom of the table. And then you've got Odd BK and Bodø/Glimt second and third in the table. It's a bit of a strange league at the moment, isn't it, Steve? What's your general overview of the season so far?
My general overview is there's a lot of wackiness going on, isn't there? There's a lot of crazy things going on. You're right. We've got promoted teams. Mjøndalen and Viking are as high as 9th and 6th in the table. So, that's astonishing in itself. The Rosenborg situation, we're going to talk about that in detail. And, there's a few surprises up and down there. I've just got the feeling this could be a really daft year where I'm not going to say that we could have a completely unusual, unexpected champion yet because Molde are going so well. But if this turned into a bit of a sort of Leicester City sort of year, it wouldn't completely shock me.
Yeah, I mean, on that subject, I always look at the Norwegian league, I'll be honest, and I look at it and I look to see how far Rosenborg are off the top, because I always think that no matter how badly they start, and we're 28% of the season in now, we're getting to the sort of we're over a quarter of the season done. They're 13 points off the top now with a game in hand. I look at it always as, at what point are they out of the picture? Before we move on to sort of the general talk about them, do you think they're out of the picture? Just like yes or no? No, very briefly.
Funny enough, yes, I do think they're out of the picture. I was thinking this to myself earlier. Even if they won every single remaining game now, 22 games, that would get them to 72 points. Now, there's no guarantee that would even win the league. So if they're gonna challenge, they're probably gonna have to win at least 20 of their last 22 games, which is a massive ask. Too much of a big ask.
Okay. And yeah, I think, on that note, let's continue with it, because this is the biggest talking point in the season, really. This is the equivalent of sort of Barcelona in the relegation zone, really, isn't it? So I don't think there's anywhere else we can, start this section with. I'm going to read you a tweet here, okay? And I want your comments on this tweet.
Mm-hmm.
You might even recognise it. There is surely no way Erik Horneland can survive this loss today. Once again, another miserable display by RBK. They offered sod all. He's had long enough now, and they absolutely need to sack him. Does that ring a bell to you, Steve? And what's your thoughts?
Well, that tweet came from the Nordic Football Pod Twitter account, didn't it?
Your word, my friend.
I presume you wrote that, but
No,
it was me. Actually, it was me. Yeah, I did write that, and look, by the time this pod goes live, he may already be sacked. To be honest, if I was in charge at Rosenborg right now, he'd be out the door. Simple as that. It's just not good enough. I'm all for giving managers time, but 8 games is not a lot. But if you combine that with the pre-season issues, the rumours of falling out with players behind the scenes, it's just obvious under his management. And the final nail in the coffin is he's lost at home to the team he moved from, Haugesund. I mean, he was in charge of them last year. He should know them very, very well. And I was thinking before this match that he may well get the win because he knows how all their players operate, etc., etc. But Haugesund deserved the win, and it was typical flat performance. You would think it looks to me like he's probably lost the dressing room. You don't know unless you're within the club, but I don't think he's a bad manager necessarily. It's just not working at Rosenborg. It's just not the right fit. And I would be very surprised if he's in charge before the next game. I mean, the only thing is that the next game is in just 3 days' time at home to Mjøndalen. But to be brutally honest, Mio, you could be in charge of them there, and they should be able to win that match. But, it just looks like if he's in charge, that they're not going to get anything out of it. So I struggle to see a way forward for Rosenborg with Erik Horneland right now, John.
Well, yeah, and on that subject, I mean, Erik Horneland cut a really despondent figure after the match. He described it as a team in trouble and said they are lacking in confidence in a big way, and said it's very difficult to be the leader of this team, which has called into question his position. There's been a couple of behind-the-scenes issues, hasn't there, Steve? Can you just clear those up for us? Nicholas Bentner for one, and Adi Benro is another. What's going on there behind the scenes at this club?
Yeah, it seems. I mean, this first originated in February, where Adi Benro came out in an interview saying, "I'm not sure I'm going to be as sort of effective in this team under Erik Horneland's system because he's asking me to be too disciplined with my approach." And he felt he was better as kind of a free spirit in a free role, which is a good idea for a player like him with the amount of skills he's got. In terms of Adi Benro, I'm not saying he's alienated Adi Benro. It's just not in favour. I don't think that player suits Erik Horneland's system at all. He's quite a negative manager. He doesn't want people like that necessarily in his team, free spirits. But I think Samuel was just getting on with the job. He's not publicly criticised him or anything. He's just saying, I'm going to wait for my chance and hopefully perform. In fact, one thing he also said is, if these youngsters are in the team ahead of me, maybe at this point in time, they're a better fit for the team. With Bentner, it's a little bit more complicated. I can't really comment too much about this because I think you have to be within the club to know what's going on. But we all know Bentner had the winter effectively in jail in his own home. There was a lot of talk that his conditioning wasn't very good heading into the season, which you might expect from that point of view, and that his attitude has been quite wrong as well. But it just seems to me like I think Horneland has had enough of him and he wants to try and get him out of the club. He's left him out of the match squad.
Let's pick up that point there because that is really the crux of it here. Is he actually good enough, Nicholas Bentner? And maybe we should do a poll on this on Twitter or something. It's all good. We've been hammering the manager for many, many weeks, and you've been on him since day one from the preview podcast. And fair play to you because you seem to have got this one spot on. But is Bentner good enough to be in this team? Is he doing enough to actually justify his place in the team? It's all well being a big name, but is he worthy of the place, or is this really a catastrophic error of judgment from the manager?
Well, there was an interesting situation, I think, 2 or 3 weeks ago when Horneland really made what I would call his first desperate-looking starting 11 of the season. It was against Sarpsborg at home. They actually won it 1-0. It was a desperate-looking selection because he started youngsters like Erik Botheim, who, by the way, is quite a very good, talented youngster. And he started guys ahead of Bentner, Söderlund, Adi Benro on the bench. And I think a lot of people, you couldn't really knock him for that selection because Bentner, from what we've seen of him on the field, has not done enough at all. So you could say it was justified. The problem is, I think, if you were a manager going into a new club, right, John, you would look at the squad and you would think, who are my best players? You know who the best players are in a team. The simple fact is Bentner and Adi Benro, they're the best two players probably at the club, or they're in the top 5 best players, if you can get them firing properly. So if it was me, I would be looking to build that team around them. I'm not saying I would kind of mollycoddle them, but I would certainly try and get them on side because I know what they're capable of. And Horneland just doesn't seem to be able to do that with these guys. And I think that can affect the rest of the squad because, let's be honest, Bentner, he's quite a powerful influence, isn't he, behind the scenes? He's probably slagging the manager off to the rest of the players, discontent in there. The other players will see this and question the manager, perhaps. So I don't think he's got it right in that regard. But at the same time, Bentner hasn't helped himself with some pretty poor performances on the field as well.
What about tactics-wise? Has he changed the shape and things like that? You mentioned he might be changing the system. Is that part of the problem here?
A big problem at the start of the year. I think the first 6 games they played 6 different formations. They've gone from 4-4-1-1 to 4-4-2, 4-2-3-1, 4-3-3. After the first 4 games, he reluctantly admitted that his own systems were not working and that he would have to revert back to the traditional Rosenborg 4-3-3, which they've done for donkey's years. I can't remember the last time they weren't a 4-3-3 side. And that's almost like an admission of defeat, isn't it? When the players see that, they're thinking, all right, yeah, he's going to have to go back to what we did before instead of using his own systems over a prolonged period of time. So that concerns me in both aspects, that A, his own systems weren't working, and B, he basically had to back down to and go back to the Rosenborg traditional way. But it seems right now, the formation-wise, you don't know what they're going to have. He's played the wrong players in certain spots as well. Earlier in the year, he was playing, for example, Yermund Assen in a defensive midfielder holding role when he's a creative playmaker. That just doesn't make sense. So he hasn't helped himself either.
Well, yeah, I think we'll leave it with the bottom line. I mean, good analysis there, Steve. We'll leave it with the bottom line with Dagbladet Sport in Norway, a paper who has described it as an utter fiasco. And I think that really says quite a lot about the situation. Let's move on from the second worst team in this division then, Rosenborg, and it's not going to be often we'll say that in our pod lifetime. Let's look at the top now. Joint top, we have some quite bizarre situation here. I mean, probably the least talked about team in the history of this podcast are joint top.
They are, yeah, and they've got a game in hand on Molde as well. I just before we move, Molde actually lost on the 16th of May round. I didn't see any of this game. I was focusing in on some other fixtures, but they were 2-0 up away at Kristiansund, and they lost 3-2, which is not very good, is it? But the advantage from Molde is they're the only really big team right up there right now. So it may not be costly for them. Regarding Odd, well, they're you know what, they're a grind out sort of team, John. They base their game on defence and they like to counter attack. They won 1-0 against Ranheim today. I wasn't actually very impressed with them. Ranheim, the key in this game, Ranheim had a penalty given and then the linesman overruled the referee bizarrely. And then Odd scored a really good goal from Rashani. But look, they're really good when they're underdogs and they've got a good manager. So maybe they can stay up there. But they won't be the most enterprising side to watch, despite having 2 or 3 good playmakers, you know.
Interesting. Yes, and I mean, Odd are doing well. We have to praise them, to be honest. You know, I've never seen them so high, certainly when we've been since we were doing this podcast. Very good defensive record as well, the best in the league with 6 conceded. But Molde, obviously, we talked about Molde in previous podcasts, so let's move on. You wanted to talk about Strømsgodset, didn't you?
I did, yeah. And the problem is that there's been a managerial change at the club this week. Bjørn Petter Ingebretsen has resigned his position, citing ill health. And we, all of us here at Nordic Football Podcast, do wish him all the best in that regard. But I'll be honest, I think if it wasn't for the ill health, you would think he's jumped before he's pushed, because nothing was working. And nothing is working, should I say. They won on the opening day, but they've since gone 7 without a win. And there's question marks both defensively, offensively. Very flat, and this is a club that traditionally was challenging for medals in the last decade quite a lot, but the last 2 years have just gone they've been like a sinking ship, really. They just survived by the skin of their teeth last year, and I think they've got a lot of issues on their plate, otherwise they're going to be involved in a relegation battle this term.
Yeah, and I mean, a quick question on that one. Where would they be without Mustafa Abdellaoui? Because he is, in fact, one of the best players in the league in terms of expected goals and assists. He's 5th in the table and 2nd in the league for the expected goals. So when you take that into account, you know, the fact that they're so low in the table, I mean, you know, 3rd bottom. Without him, where would they be, Steve?
Well, without his goals, they would be bottom, wouldn't they? I've mentioned him on this podcast before. Moss, as he is affectionately known. A good striker. I rate him. I think he's a good player. He's just not. He's done well to score as many as he has because the service hasn't been great into him. I think Strømsgodset have got issues in all sorts of areas. But probably the most, it's mental and confidence. The squad clearly doesn't have much of that. There's not a great feeling around the place right now. In terms of quality on paper, still think they should have enough to survive. The big thing now is they've got to make sure they get a manager in who gets the crowd back on side by playing some enterprising attacking football. Traditionally, it's always been a club that has a real proper go in every game, especially at home, and they need to keep doing that. So it's a vital. The next managerial appointment for them is a big one. and I'll be interested to see who they get in.
Well, yeah, and just before we move on, regarding Strømsgodset, they finished 13th last season, so one could argue that this is sort of a continuation of that, and maybe even slightly worse than that. But certainly a lot for them to improve on in the season. Is there any rumours on who would take the job quickly, Steve?
Well, a funny rumour I heard is that Erik Horneland's going to get sacked by Rosenborg, and then he's going to be appointed by Strømsgodset. I mean, funnier things have happened, haven't they? So, but in terms of those that are available on the free market, I've not really heard too much so far. But
who would you like to see? I mean, is there any upcoming young managers maybe that we should be thinking of, or is it sort of just a case of a merry-go-round similar to the Allardyces of this world?
I'm not a great expert in the league below the Obos-ligaen, so I'm not 100% sure who the best young coaches are in Norway at that level. But maybe it would be a situation where they should look to that league and think who's playing good football. But unfortunately, the appointment of the manager who's just gone, Inge Bretsen, that was like one of what you call a dinosaur appointment, a bit like an Allardyce, Pardew sort of thing, where it's the same merry-go-round lot. So this club have a history of sadly appointing guys like that. So I'd imagine it's someone quite uninspiring in the end who takes the job. But teams can prove you wrong. I just hope I think they've got to bring an attacking manager in though to get the fans back on side.
Goals, goals, goals is the order of the day then for Strømsgodset. Thanks for that analysis there, Steve. Now I'm going to move on. We have a question from a listener, Robert Karwadine. I hope I pronounced that correctly. And his question is, any hope for Tromsø after today? I do not see any. Steve, give us a brief overview of why he is so pessimistic. What's happened in the big derby?
Well, cheers for the question, Rob. And Tromsø at bottom of the table, well, rock bottom. Lost 6 out of 8 games after defeat in the derby of the North today against Bodø/Glimt at home. And I have to say that Glimt deserved the win. Tromsø started well. They got an early goal, and I thought, they might get something here. But from like the 20th minute onwards, only one team really ever looked like scoring, I thought. And you can tell Glimt are in great form. The two teams just they're in different stratospheres right now. And the league positions shows it. But I'm not sure I can't quite pinpoint what the problem with Tromsø is. They have had injury issues, and I don't like to use that as an excuse, but they have had some bad ones. And Simo Valakari is a good manager. I like him. I like his style. I think if you give him enough time, he can easily turn things around. It just feels like they're conceding goals at the wrong point, crucial moments in games. That's the second match in a row now where they've been leading 1-0 at home and they've lost in the last 10 minutes. Their last 3 defeats, 2 of them, they've been literally goals scored with the last kick of the game. So which is kind of harsh, isn't it, in a way when that happens to a team consistently. Maybe going forward, the boot will be on the other foot where they can get some late goals themselves. But yeah, defensively, I think it's probably where the problems are lying. And when you keep losing games, they've got a young squad apart from a couple of players. When you keep losing games, the confidence can go, can't it? In terms of the question that Rob just sent in there, any hope for them? I don't see any. I certainly do see plenty of hope still. I say the manager's a good manager. They've got young, talented players who can turn it around. I certainly wouldn't be writing them off yet. And at this point in time, I would still say I'd be surprised if they got relegated.
Okay. And yeah, I must say, point of view, I think for my money, Bodø/Glimt have been the most exciting team I've seen this season in Norway. I've not seen huge amounts of the league, but yeah, certainly, along with Molde, I'd say, I've really been impressed with some of their young talents. Hakon Evjen being one of them, and I think he's off to the Under-20 World Cup, which kicks off in a few weeks' time. And as for you, Rob, thanks for your question. And just to briefly point out to you, do catch up on Nordic Football Podcast Season 3, Episode 3, where we have an exclusive interview with Tromsø manager Simo Valakari. You can listen to his thoughts on life in Tromsø on that very, very good podcast with Steve. Let's move on because we're running short of time here. We'll briefly run through a couple of points. Steve, you wanted to talk about one other team, and that was Sarpsborg. before we finish.
Yeah, I've really got to mention them because I think this is a story that's going underneath the radar because of all the other big issues going on in the league. Sarpsborg are only on 7 points in the table. They've lost their last 3 games. This is a team I expected to be up there, and I think most people expected to be up there. And I've pinpointed their problem to they cannot convert their chances. According to Y-Scout data, their expected goals are 10, but they've only scored 6. And there is the fundamental issue that they're really missing Patrick Mortensen, who scored a lot of goals for them last year. Jürgen Strand-Larsen scored 20 pre-season goals, but he's only got 1 so far. They haven't got any strikers who can find the onion bag, I'm afraid. And it's now what that's led to is obviously them not winning, not collecting enough points. And now they're on this losing streak where it just doesn't look like they can get a goal from anywhere. And performances are dipping. I'm a bit concerned about them, really, because I didn't see this coming. Have they got a good manager? The squad is really vast, perhaps too vast. Maybe there's too many players there in the squad. They've got injuries as well at the moment. And this is a story worth keeping track of because they've got a home match against Ranheim next. I mean, if they didn't win that, or say they lost it, then I really would start to get concerned about Sarpsborg because really this is a team that should be up there in the top 3 or 4, and they're missing a massive chance to challenge, considering where Rosenborg are this year. And Brown obviously not that great at the moment either. They missed an open goal, and this is another season where too many transfers, ins and outs, I think has unsettled the squad. So I'm a bit concerned about Sarpsborg, mate. They're a bit similar to what Norrköping are with you in that they're making me look a little bit of a mug at times.
Yes, I remember you being quite praiseworthy of them in recent months and their performances. So, yeah, 1 win all season is quite concerning, really, isn't it? It's not a good sign. I think we're going to leave Vålerenga for another podcast, but I did notice that they've risen up to 4th after your scolding of them on a previous show. So, it obviously had an effect, your sort of hairdryer treatment on them. So we'll touch on them in a future pod. I wanted to ask you very quickly about the Fantasy Football League.
Yes.
You posted that you had the best score of the most recent game week, I think. How are things looking in the Norway Fantasy League? Because we've had a lot of new followers based on that league's fantasy football.
Yeah, well, we do have our own league here, the Nordic Football Pod League. You can join this league, and I'll post up the code on Twitter. Trying to find the code now, actually. But yeah, I'm not top of this league anymore. We've got someone called Joe FPL Graphics, who's been very impressive, actually, with his points tally. He's at 572 points. I'm second in the league. But there's a lot of good players up there who I think have a history in Fantasy Premier League. They know their stuff. I had the highest points tally in our league in the previous game round, but someone else from the May the 16th round got to 79 points, which was quite impressive. The Lord's Men, Daniel Lord, got to 79 points. So, yeah, join that league. We also have an Allsvenskan Fantasy League, which there's not as many in there. So if we could get some more into that league, that'd be great. Some interesting stuff there. And before we go, there is some questions I need to ask you, John. Someone on Twitter did get in touch about some things. So before we go off, this is Stephen at SteeHaveFC on Twitter. Got 3 questions, actually. First one, do you get the feeling that the Allsvenskan is IFK Göteborg's? When will Falkenberg form pick up, if ever it does? And then he also asked actually about Rosenborg, which I've already answered. But IFK, is it? Do you get the feeling it's going to be their season?
I think it's a bit premature to say it's going to be their season. I think winning the title, you need more than just a good start. You need a deep squad, which in fairness they have in certain areas. I think Robin Soda, Lasse Viber is a good little combination there. Poyas Bargi's rotated them 2 well up front so far, and has got the best out of them. Even Man Saibo, an even younger player, well, a very young player in the academy, came off the bench and scored a goal against Sirius in a fantastic win. But as I mentioned, I think you need something slightly deeper to win the title. I've talked about IFK already, so I won't talk on this for too long. But yeah, I just think you also need experience. Let's keep that in mind. And I still think with their defence, there's a bit of, I said it last week, but I think there's question marks about the centre-backs. I think Calisir and Starfelt, can you win a league title with those guys? Jury's out. Sebastian Olsen's done very well at right back, so he's been good, but still think there's a couple of holes in their squad for a consistent title challenge. But maybe the summer could be very crucial because they've been linked with some big names, and if they were to get those players to supplement the squad, then who knows? And just on the question of Falkenberg, very briefly, no, I can't see the form picking up soon. Funnily enough, their expected goals is much better than their league position suggests. So you do feel a little bit sorry for them in a sense, but they've just got this hopeless feeling about them. You know, they've got an air. Sometimes you've got a team who just have an air of, you know, for want of a better word, losers. You know, they just have that sort of vibe about them where they're just going to go down without a trace. And you'd like to see it not happen, but, you know, Djurgården have battered them now. They struggled against the likes of the only games they've won against Örebro, and then 2 draws with Sirius and AFC Eskilstuna. Those 3 are probably the worst teams in the league alongside them. So I'm worried about Falkenberg, I'll be honest.
Yeah, it doesn't look great for them or for a few teams down there at the moment, to be honest with you. But okay, well, I think that pretty much is going to have to bring an end to this episode, running a bit short on time. So, well, thanks very much for your contribution as ever, John, and we look forward to some more episodes coming very soon.
Yeah, just quickly before we finish, for those still listening, Facebook, we had a poll, with a Goal of the Month poll. Steve, did you want to announce the winner of that poll? Or?
Oh, yes, I completely forgot about this. Yeah, I did the Goal of the Month compilation, and the winner was Ola Brynhildsen from Starbek for an overhead kick against Rosenborg at home. Don't know if you agreed with that one, John, but that is what the vote came out with. I personally thought that the Hakon Evjen goal was the better one, but the public have voted.
Yeah, I voted for Hakon Evjen, actually.
Yeah, so on Facebook, give us a like on Facebook, please. We need as many likes as we can on there. You can follow us on Twitter at Nordic Foot Pod. And we'll see you again very soon. And from me, it's goodbye.
Goodbye to everyone.